Hello, everyone. I want to welcome everyone that is here with us on the live stream and welcome you all to the Water Productivity webinar series for 2021. I think many of you are familiar with this water PIP project that we're a part of, and we've been involved in the water productivity work. And we would like to update you on what is happening with the project and with water productivity research in general. So I may be familiar. My name is Lauren Zielinski. I'm a project assistant at IHE Delft. I was helping moderate some of the master classes and the hackathon. So it's nice to see you all again. And I have a co-host with me today.
My name is Abdulrahim Safi. I am geoanalyst for water and agriculture with eLeaf. I will be co-hosting this webinar with Lauren.
So we're very happy to
Thank
have Safi with us today.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you.
And Safi is actually a recent graduate from IHE's MSc program, so it's also nice to see him continuing his professional career in the field of water productivity.
Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity. And yeah, I really like working with water productivity and agriculture and water. Yeah, that's a thing which is really close to my heart. Thanks.
Yeah, fantastic. So I will do just a quick introduction to our webinar series. This is the first of a couple different webinars that we'll be hosting. For some of you, maybe you're new to the Water PIP project. You may be asking, what does this stand for? It's an interesting acronym, but it's new. It actually stands for Water Productivity Improvement in Practice. So that is the Water PIP project that we are working on. And the goal of this project is to develop capacity building around the concept of water productivity, as well as the WAPOR database. So the WAPOR database is something that has been put together by FAO and other partners, but it's focusing on water productivity through open access, remotely sensed data. So it's a really nice database. I would recommend going to check it out, and it offers different data layers for Africa and the Middle East at the moment, but with plans to expand globally. So what do we do as a project? How do we do this capacity building? We really focus on sharing the concepts and the applications of different kinds of water productivity. I think Maria, our presenter today, will get into a bit about this. But we also want to raise awareness around water productivity. For some people, this may be a new concept. Water productivity can be thought of more crop per drop rather than crop per acre of land. So we're thinking about things and how much water we are using or consuming, particularly around agriculture. We are interested in sharing different ways that WAPOR can be used for field-based applications, using water productivity, analyzing it and interpreting the results, and what does that mean for different water users. And then finally, the goal is to provide recommendations on how to increase water productivity or potentially increase yields, like ways to use our water more efficiently. So we have done this through a series of master classes. I think about a year ago we had a 6 or 7, and many of you joined us then. And then we also have some webinar series like what we're doing now, keeping you updated on our work. We have different videos on our YouTube channel, and we're also very excited to be working on a MOOC, so a massive open online course that's currently under development and will be available for you in 2022. So if you want to keep up to date on all of these activities, I recommend going to our project website, so waterpip.un-ihe.org. And we also have a WaterPip Twitter account that we share updates regularly, and then we host all of our videos on our WaterPip Project YouTube account. So I would recommend connecting with us on those different channels. So like I said, this is our first out of 4 webinars that we'll be hosting. Next week, we'll be catching up with our hackathon winners that we had last, I think, November, and then sharing some of the latest research that's been happening for new applications of WAPOR in the agricultural fields. And finally, we'll be hosting a session for Cairo Water Week 2021, which is free to attend. So we hope you all can join us there as well. So the agenda today, I think it's going to be quite a nice presentation. So I'm Lauren Zielinski doing a short introduction, but then we have Maria Christoforidou with us. She is a research assistant with Wageningen University and Research, and she's really been the driver behind the policy analysis framework and the different applications in the Middle East and North Africa. So she'll be sharing the work that she's been doing, but also having this as a very interactive session. So asking for your input as well. And then at the end, we'll have a Q&A session with Maria and kind of just discuss any questions or get into the topic a little bit further. So a couple rules for or guidelines for this webinar is we want to make this really interactive. So we ask that you engage with the presenters or you ask your questions using the chat box on the YouTube channel. So everything that you write in there we'll be able to see and we'll be sure to make sure that we comment on it. We like to know who is here with us in the room. So we ask that you introduce yourself. You can say your name or your country or your interest in water productivity or related fields, maybe the organization you work with. That kind of helps us understand who we're here with today. We really would like you to ask questions during the presentation as well. So again, if you have something that you have a question about, put it in the chat box and we'll get to it towards the end, the Q&A session, or maybe we'll stop for questions in the middle of the presentation as well. And if you would like to watch this recording or you would like to look at the presentation again or any additional resources that come up in the discussion, you can go to our YouTube channel as well as our website. And most importantly, have fun. So we like to engage with you regularly, and I think this is one of the ways that we do it. So please, use that chat box, engage with us, and we're happy to answer any questions or hear some feedback from you. And I think the final thing is today we'll be using a program called Mentimeter. For those who are new to Mentimeter, it's a way to kind of gather information from a variety of audience members, let's say. So what will happen is when Maria asks, she will give you a code. And so on your phone, you can go to mentimeter.com, and at the top of the page, you'll see a place to enter your code. And in there, you'll be able to respond to the questions that she posts. So with that, I would like to welcome Maria to the room, and very excited to hear what you have to say. Welcome, Maria.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Saf and Lauren. Nice to see you all, and indeed, thanks for joining the webinar today. Today I'm going to talk a bit about the importance of policy analysis for water productivity. I will show the framework that colleagues and I have been developing, and then discuss the application of this framework and how the analysis that we did fed some policy discussion and raise awareness about the different types of or aspects of water productivity. So before we begin, I'm going to let you know a bit about the outline of this webinar. First, and because this is the first webinar of this series, I'm going to remind you to refresh a bit your mind on the different perspectives on water productivity. Then we will relate these perspectives with policymaking and national development objectives. And even if at official policy level, the implications of water productivity of different aspects are not explicitly linked with the policy targets, we need policy analysis that shows how relevant different types are. And this is the reason that we developed a framework on how to conduct the policy analysis for agricultural water management with a focus on water productivity in a broader sense. Then I'm going to discuss the policy analysis that we did for Egypt and the main agricultural strategies that we were able to extract from the policy reviews and the policy documents. And lastly, we're going to have a small Mentimeter exercise, as Lauren pointed out, on how these two strategies, what are the implications of these two strategies for different policy objectives. So, water productivity. I think, it's been a buzz concept. It's been used a lot recently in different policy organizations and governmental bodies, but it has different meanings and different perspectives. It can include water productivity of different sectors that use water, but in our project, we mainly focus on agricultural water productivity. The first understanding that is also quite common is that of biophysical water productivity. And as Lauren mentioned, the more crop per drop. So in this perspective, water productivity focuses on the agricultural benefits, the biomass or the yield that is produced per unit of water use. However, the benefits of water use are not only limited to this. If we adopt a more holistic approach, we can see that there are other socioeconomic benefits, such as economic benefits gained from agricultural production, other national goals for food security or food self-sufficiency, national policy objectives for increasing employment, equity, as well as objectives regarding environmental sustainability. During the previous master classes, my colleague Jeroen Vos presented an indicative example of how water management and water productivity can have implications for issues of employment. So Jeroen described a case in Peru and in Guasa project where water is transferred from highlands that are mainly poor farmers are cultivating the land, and the transfer was to the coast for agricultural production for the export market. After analysis of the income of poor workers or smallholders and investors in the coast, it was clear that the poor farmers were better off in the highlands compared to the coast. What this means is that when employment and livelihoods for poor people, it means that the livelihoods of poor people was not positively influenced by this water transfer. So this has implications for policy making. So if policies want to focus on improving livelihoods, water productivity needs to also consider this. As such, all these perspectives are extremely relevant for policy making. And thus, it is clear that water productivity is not only a technical indicator to assess crop productivity, but it also has implication on national strategic development targets. However, these links between national targets and water productivity might not be explicitly mentioned in strategies, but it's essential that we raise awareness how water use and other targets for improving water productivity might affect relevant policy targets such as food self-sufficiency, employment, and environmental sustainability. And then we also can understand the trade-offs that are involved in this process. So to assess the link between water productivity and national development objectives, we developed a 10-step framework for policy analysis on agricultural water management. So the framework consists of 4 phases, and the first 2 are the preparatory phase and the analyze phase. For the preparatory phase, as in different reviewing processes, the first step is to determine the scope of the review define the policies that are relevant for the scope, the time range that policies were produced and how this might affect the findings, and the objectives of the policy review. In our case, the objective was to understand the national development plans regarding productivity and efficient water use, as well as keep track of other more broad policy objectives, as the ones I mentioned before: food security, environmental sustainability, and all the other benefits that I mentioned before. After that, the relevant documents were gathered and analyzed. And then we move to the second phase, the analyzing phase, where the main step is to extract key priorities, understand how the specific country interprets the productive water use, and finally extract the main agricultural development strategies. Also, in this analysis, triangulation is very important. So for this purpose, short literature review is also essential to make sure that we understand fully the context of the issue. Then moving to the other two phases of the framework, we have the validation and the policy influence. The validation is done by discussing the findings with experts from the specific country. And then the most fun and important thing comes, the policy influence and the policy discussion. And where we try to discuss how these findings can be used to raise awareness and improve cooperation between national bodies, but also international bodies. We have applied this framework for a number of countries to conduct policy reviews, including Kenya, Jordan, and Egypt. For the Egypt analysis, our policy review has led to a policy discussion during the last year's Cairo Water Week, where participants discussed the implications of different agricultural strategies on different policy objectives. Following, I'm going to discuss more in detail the case of Egypt, and we will do a small exercise with Mentimeter. So as we did the policy review and applied the framework for water and agriculture in Egypt, it was clear that Egypt was aiming at maximizing the overall benefits derived from water, especially considering the water scarcity context of Egypt. This is something very important. Agricultural water use, the main findings, the main policy targets that we saw was to rationalize the agricultural water use, and Egypt aspired to become self-sufficient in specific crops while promoting low water consuming crops and exports. Also, it was clear that Egypt focused on expanding the agricultural area by improving irrigation efficiency. These targets are to be met through two main strategies, the vertical and the horizontal strategy. The vertical strategy refers mainly to existing lands in the Nile Delta, and it's about raising production in those areas, mainly for staple crops that are for the domestic use and the domestic market. It's good to mention that the Nile Delta consists of smallholders, and some fragmentation is also evident there. Then, regarding the horizontal expansion strategy, this was referring to expansion to new lands, to the desert, mainly for cultivating high-value crops for the export market. These two strategies then have implications that affect policy targets on the different benefit derived from water. During the Cairo Water Week of 2020, we asked participants to assess how these two strategies will score in the different aspects. The aspects that we defined was the biophysical water productivity, this first understanding, as I mentioned before, of what is water productivity, so yield per cubic meter of water consumed. Then the land productivity, yield per hectare, per area. Then the economic water productivity, so how much value can be obtained per cubic meter of water. Then the food security, the access to all people at all times to enough food, which is not necessarily met through domestic production. And then also food self-sufficiency, which focuses on producing domestically what the nation needs for food. Then employment, the number of jobs generated under the two different strategies, and the environmental sustainability. So what are the differences in the two strategies when assessing things like groundwater depletion and other environmental issues? The scoring that participants of the Cairo Water Week could give was between 1 and 5, with 1 referring to very low increase of biophysical water productivity or 0 increase of biophysical water productivity, land productivity with these strategies, and 5 being a very high increase. So the aim of this was partly to raise awareness on the implications that water productivity has in different policy relevant factors, but also the trade-offs that emerge between the different objectives under the same strategy. And finally, to sparkle the discussion around these issues. Of course, these analyses are data intensive. So to properly assess all these aspects, you need to have a lot of data. But in our case, we had limited data. So we based this on expert knowledge and sharing of insights of local context. And today we will use the two development strategies of Egypt as an exercise to discuss how we'd expect each strategy to influence the different policy objectives. So maybe before we go to the Mentimeter exercise, maybe it's good to open the floor to questions if everything is clear so far.
So if anyone has questions, feel free to post them in the chat box in the YouTube channel. But while we wait for some people to ask questions, I have a question about the scoring system.
Mm-hmm.
So you asked people in the audience to, give a ranking. Is this based on their opinion, or is this based on kind of facts that they know?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess it's a little hard to predict the future if you do these different strategies, but what was the advice you would give people on how to score these different indicators?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's mostly, it ranges depending on how well aware you are of the topic. But for us now, it's more of an opinion and a sort of exercise to think, okay, how, if we increase economic water productivity, what would this mean in terms of food self-sufficiency and food security? For example, if you have quite high economic water productivity, you obtain more economic value per unit of water use, and thus you might also be able to increase your food security as you have more value, more money to import food from abroad. So it's indeed it requires either data to support this or expert knowledge. But in our case, I think it's nice to reflect a bit on these linkages and interconnections. But I do agree that it requires some future thinking and yeah.
Yeah, and I think having knowledge of the area also helps you kind of understand what could happen
Yeah.
in different scenarios.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we do have a question from the YouTube chat from Ashraf. So they ask, what does the score refer to, the very low or very high? Is it a relative importance or something a bit different?
So the score refers to if we have as a current scenario, and then with this strategy, if we adopt this strategy, then what you expect? Do you expect the economic water productivity to increase? If yes, then how much? Is it very high that economic water productivity will increase, or very low? So does this answer a bit better or give a bit of insights on the scoring method?
Yeah, I think it helps. Sometimes it's a different way of thinking. So I think with the example, it will probably also be a bit more clear.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
And we have another question from Celine, and she asks, SDG 2.3.1 already computes a economic water productivity. Is this a different scoring from that, or you can discuss if they're related?
I am not sure how the SDG computes the economic water productivity, but this is this is a bit more broad, I would say. It's not the indicators or the aspects that we have here are not directly linked to, or we haven't worked on this. Maybe we could also consider that to connect them to the SDGs.
Yeah. Thanks, Maria. I have one question. You said that this framework, if let's say we apply to other areas and the areas are water scarce, what do you think? What do we should do to apply this to water scarce regions? The water scarce and data scarce as well.
So
Yeah.
I think it's so for scarce regions, it seems that the water productivity becomes more interesting because you have more competition for water from different water users. So in that sense, I think it's more relevant in those cases. And about the data scarcity, this is an issue that I think it's taking place in a lot of places in the world, and to find data is not always easy. And
Yeah.
this is also
Yeah.
something that we have run to. Yeah.
And I think this
Yeah.
also could be
Thanks.
a way to gather professional opinion or expert opinion. Often, when we are in data scarce situations, we rely on people who are working on the ground and really understand all the interconnections happening around water and agriculture, for example, and the economy. So it could be a way, depending on who you're asking, to gather this kind of information, which would increase
Yeah.
the amount of data that you have available.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Indeed.
well, great questions. Thank you, everyone. I think, Maria, you have a little bit more of your presentation. I think we're going to get
Yeah.
into the Mentimeter. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we can get back to that.
Yeah. Yes. So please go to menti.com and then use the code 56333795. And then I think I can also share my screen here for this. Yep. And then if you Yes. So if you assess, if you rank how the first it's, but you cannot see. So this is the horizontal expansion strategy that is about increasing the production of already existing lands, which is mainly for staple crops and the domestic use. How would you expect this strategy to affect all these different aspects? And when you answer the questions, it will appear also clearly here. So it's a dynamic way to see your answers. So we have a first answer that scores very high on food security and food self-sufficiency.
So just I have my app open. Just as a reminder, the horizontal expansion is cultivating new lands.
Oh,
right?
no. No, you're right. You're right. I got confused. Yeah, the horizontal expansion is cultivating new lands with. I'm sorry. I thought we were with a vertical, but the horizontal is new lands, mainly mainly for the export market, and high value crops. Maybe that is a source of confusion, the mistake that I made earlier, because if you have mostly exports, then maybe the food self-sufficiency is not so much increased. But I'm also curious to hear if the thoughts of the people that score this high. Maybe. Now the self-sufficiency and food security goes a bit down. And the interesting thing that I see for now is that environmental sustainability is very low, which I think is indeed true. You expand your area, and agriculture is associated with some environmental sustainability issues, fertilizers. So that is indeed true. The economic water productivity, I would expect to be a bit more high because economic water productivity with high value crops would mean that you have more crop per drop. No, I'm confused. No, it would mean that you have more economic benefits derived from water use, and especially if you think that expanding to new areas requires a lot of inputs, technology, then this can only be done when the economic benefits are sufficient enough. And for the employment, I'm not sure if it's Lauren, if it's possible to open the floor to also participants to share their thoughts.
Yeah, of course. If people are interested, they can put their opinions, their thoughts, more questions in the chat box, and we can share that with the group. I mean, I can go through my thought process, and maybe you can
definitely
correct me, or you can.
It's nice to hear.
Have a discussion. So, I would assume, let's say, if we're talking about expanding croplands for high value export products.
Mhm.
I think, my understanding is that food security would not be impacted, but I gave it a low score because most of this food is not staying in country; it's going somewhere else.
Mhm.
Um, so I gave self food security a low score. Self sufficiency, maybe you can talk a bit about the differences between those two, but I also thought that since most of the food is going abroad or being sold on the international market, it's not helping people feed themselves.
Mhm.
Employment, because it is a high value crop, they can afford to hire more people to work the fields. um, I guess depending on what kind of crop it is, maybe you just buy more farm tractors or machinery, and maybe there's actually not that high employment because there's so much mechanical work happening.
Mhm.
um, Environmental sustainability I thought was quite low, because if you're expanding out, often that means you're taking away ecosystems, you're taking away, typically it's untouched lands. You're not expanding into a local parking lot.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But that, I think that would also be very case specific. Maybe in Egypt, it's a very desert country. Maybe it's not a very delicate ecosystem that you would be expanding into. Whereas if you're in Brazil and you're cutting down the Amazon rainforest, that might have a kind of a different environmental impact.
Mhm.
Um, and then the economic water productivity I thought was high, um, because you are selling it. So those were kind of the thoughts that were going through my head.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's valid points indeed. And I think, yeah, food self-sufficiency maybe is indeed this that you can obtain the food that the nation needs from the country itself. But then for food security might also mean that you have the economic power to, or the purchasing power to import food from abroad. So you might not be self sufficient, but you might be food secure. In that sense, one might think that economic water productivity, if you have high economic water productivity, then you have economic power, and then you can meet the domestic demand by food, by imports. So food security can be a bit higher in some cases. And then indeed for employment, and I think that's a very interesting finding from the example of Jeroen Vos, that at the end you really need to go in detail in what this means for local people, because yeah, you might argue that also the horizontal expansion provides new opportunities for people to be employed in, but then it might be that they get paid less. So these are indeed very context specific questions that apparently, yeah, it's we need data to have solid conclusions on them. But I think it's also very important to already think of these things. And I see that maybe there is also a comment. I just saw it now. Uh,
Yeah, from Ashraf
yeah,
about
yeah,
non-renewable water resources.
indeed. And is this? Do you relate that to the environmental sustainability aspect in the horizontal expansion strategy?
I mean, he does. Yeah, that's a very well. He maybe we're
Yeah, yeah,
responding.
yeah,
I mean, it is very important to think about. Egypt is a very dry country,
yeah.
and so where is this water coming from? Is it something that's sustainable? Is it something that's renewable, or are we pulling from these groundwater aquifers that are maybe fossil water and we'll never be able to get back? Yep. So Ashraf said yes.
Exactly.
It mostly depends on groundwater, and so
Mhm.
we're at the rate we're using groundwater globally, we're just not recharging at the same rate. So it's often something that we're losing in terms of accessible water for agricultural production.
Yeah, indeed. And then this is like non-renewable fossil groundwater resources is our basket that it's gonna run dry if we keep on using it. Without it will only increase water scarcity at the end. But yeah. Okay, maybe we can move to the scoring of the vertical expansion. Let me see. And then again, the exercise is the same, but the strategy is different. So for the vertical expansion, I have to do the move for myself to. Okay, so we already have the vertical expansion strategy is increasing the production in already existing lands that are mainly smallholders and that they grow staple food mainly for the domestic market. And already maybe we can, there is one person that had replied, now two, maybe in this case we can wait a bit so that we have a more general view of how people see that strategy. Mm-hmm. I think it is interesting to how the score went to the employment, that it's not so much increased, but the environmental sustainability is more or less, it scores more or less the same as before, I think. But we can also see that food self-sufficiency scores quite high here in this case. Yeah, which indeed makes sense. Yeah, I think again the connection between food self-sufficiency and food security is interesting to see. That in the vertical expansion we have more self-sufficiency because staple crops that are the basic food that is consumed can be provided domestically. So indeed, you increase the food self-sufficiency. Then for food security, in this case, food security might also improve, and I agree with that scoring as food security can happen from food self-sufficiency. But then when thinking about the economic water productivity, that you have less purchasing power, this reduces a bit your food security because you cannot import other crops. So the relation between those three are very, very complex and complicated, and indeed true. And then for environmental sustainability, this apparently scores a lot higher than the previous example, the previous strategy. But then another consideration in this regard is the fact that if you want to produce more, then you will need to, in principle, to increase your water use or water consumption. So in that sense, this is also debatable, like environmental sustainability in terms of how it connects with water scarcity. And then for employment, I would also say that employment is not so much increased, because still the people that were already involved in agriculture in the Nile, they're still the ones that are employed. Maybe there are some opportunities as there is more production for hiring more people. Yeah. So I think that are more or less the takeaways here.
And I think Ashraf also had some nice comments about how just because we are intensifying the agriculture and we're not expanding, we're staying on our same footprint, it does not mean that it's more environmentally friendly. So, he continues on, often you need to use heavy fertilizers or many fertilizers. Maybe you switch to GMO, genetically modified seeds, instead of maybe a natural or native species. Typically, you use pesticides. I think there's also issues when it comes to soil degradation. So I think, yeah, there are considerations for both, pros and cons for both. This vertical intensification of agriculture or this expansion to new lands.
Yeah. Yeah, I fully agree. It's indeed true, and also, yeah, when even if we look only for water use, it increases the water use. So, yeah, this is also something that is in favor of this argument, indeed. Yeah, I think if there are not any other questions or about the framework or these connections between all the aspects of water productivity, I think it's nice if someone wants to reflect on it or have other questions to let us know.
Um, Maria, I would it's just my thinking. With all these indicators, is this wise to include as well technology to is an indicator that how these things are shaped by the technology, like high efficiency irrigation systems, switching from surface irrigation to the drip irrigation, or mechanization of the farms, and what do you think about this?
I think it's a very interesting question indeed. But I would say that at the end, what really is the thing that we want to look at, or the thing that matters, is the water use. So you might have more efficient systems, but it doesn't really say something about how much water you will use. If and in some cases, it might be that when you have efficient systems, that and then if you have efficient systems and then you keep on using the same amount of water, it might be that you expand the land and then you actually consume more water. So
Yeah.
that's the interesting thing, I think, with efficiency gains
Yeah.
and things like that.
Yeah, because when we are shifting from surface irrigation to the drip irrigation, then it means that we are using water more efficiently, but at the same time, more water is leaving basin boundary, and that's indeed real water loss. Um, because with surface water, still water will go back to the groundwater or can be used for other purposes with like tailwater uses. But as you said, changing technology is might be it's apparently will be more efficient, but in the longer term, it's um, uh, it's really a threat to sustainability as well.
Yeah,
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 indeed.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think Ashraf also mentioned, that's these discussions about efficiencies, which also lead to discussions about technologies, are embedded in this concept of water productivity. But it is nice to make them explicit sometimes and think about. I think we've seen some of these water productivity maps, and there are we'll get into this in webinar 3, but there's spots where we're using too much water, right? And so does that mean we should change our technologies, or do we just physically use less water? What kind of investment is it required when you understand the water productivity issues on a particular plot?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, true.
And yeah, I think it's also like also the definition of water productivity plays a role in this, because sometimes indeed it's the yield or the biomass that is produced over the water that it's um, evapotranspired, so that is actually consumed. But some other times it might be that this is not the case. So this is also something interesting to have in mind, I think.
And I have
Yeah.
a bit of a follow-up question. So in this example, you kind of gave a one or the other situation. Do we
Mhm.
do horizontal expansion or do we do vertical expansion? Are there situations where you could combine both of these approaches and find some sort of optimization in the middle?
Yeah, I think that's also a very, very, very nice question, because I think, of course, reality is always somewhere in between, and the
Yeah.
thing is to be able to assess where to do which, and then to plan around it. And of course, this is not one either or kind of situation. Uh, you have to see what you can do with both of them, because both of them provide, for example, the vertical expansion increases food self-sufficiency, while the horizontal not that much. So by combining them, you can sort of reduce your risks as a nation, as a policymaker, and then you can balance a bit this. So I think this is indeed a very interesting question for in terms of policy thinking. Yeah.
And how had you said you've started it in Egypt, and I think you're starting to apply it in other countries as well. How has the reception been to these kinds of exercises, these thought exercises? Um,
I think during the Cairo Water Week, it was clear that it is something interesting, but it needs some more data to back it up, and then continue with it in terms of how we can make more fact-based policy discussions. And that's I think something that we should have in mind, that yeah, this is a thought exercise, but as long as we are limited in terms of data, we cannot really progress in the understanding under this framework. Yeah.
and then what for you? What are the next steps in the further development or applications of this policy analysis framework?
Yeah, so the policy analysis framework has been quite. We have done a lot of policy reviews, and we are trying to apply and discuss all these findings for Jordan, for Kenya. So to actually sit together with stakeholders, policymakers, different organizations, farmers, institutions, institutes, research institutes, and then see how we can actually manage water in to combat water scarcity. Water, of course, this is a difficult task, and we shouldn't expect that we can find a solution to that. But it's good to think all together in this, and then there are very tough choices to be made. How different sectors use water, and the competition between them is something that requires a lot of thinking from everyone, I think.
So very participatory future lies ahead of you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's also the nice thing, and also from this webinar that
Yeah.
because we all need to think along. I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Maria, I'm just thinking,
Mhm.
um, because we apply this framework to a specific area and then we assess every indicator within that specific area, but that also might have some implications for other areas. Like if we apply this for Egypt, it might have some consequences or some implications for other countries, like in terms of food security or employment. Do you consider that as well, or will be that incorporated also in future in this framework?
That's a very nice question. So far, we haven't expanded the dialogues in international or uh, different countries, but I think that is indeed a valid point because, yeah, what you do in one place affects. Yeah, water doesn't recognize boundaries.
Yeah,
We should all do that, but yeah, but yes, I think so far we are not that we haven't really engaged in this aspect of it. Yeah,
yeah. Thanks. It might be in future
yeah, exactly.
included because that's
Yeah.
really important. As you said, water have no boundaries. And one thing else, you know that in a country or in a specific region, the interest or changing from users to users. Let's say interest for the farmer is different from the irrigation managers or from the basin authorities or for a country as a whole. How that is that uh, I was thinking that might be quite challenging in developing agricultural or water improvement strategies. Have you come across such challenges, or have you faced such challenges in defining these indicators and scoring the indicators?
I, I'm I, I'm not sure if I understood correctly your point because at the is it that about the water competition that you have different
Yeah,
users?
yeah, different users, but also like farmer has a different interest. Let's say they need more money
Mhm.
for a small area, but irrigation managers would like to have less water to be
Yeah,
used, or basin authorities, of course, they want less water to be used. So there is always conflict of interest between
yeah,
uh, different scales.
yeah. I think that is the reason why uh, this work focuses a lot on discussions to bring stakeholders together, different people, different perspectives, different interests, and then try to agree on some future planning and future thinking about water use as yeah, that's also indeed the challenge of it to bring all these people together and provide some strategies that can help reduce water scarcity.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Well,
I think we're at the end of our webinar now, so I would like to give a big thank you to Maria. Um, really lovely presentation, and I really like the interactive components with the Mentimeter and having us think about different scenarios and how they would really impact these different indicators. I know you've been working very hard on this, and it's great to see the progress, and we're looking forward to see, what happens in the next year and how it continues to progress.
yeah,
Uh,
thank you very much as well. I really enjoyed it as well. Thank you all.
And I'd like to
Thanks,
thank all of
Mari.
our participants, people watching the webinar today. Great questions, great comments. And if you would like to rewatch this, again, it's on the YouTube channel. We'll post Maria's presentation and the results on our Water Pip website. And we encourage you to join us next week at the same time, where we're going to check in with our hackathon winners and see the progress on their WAPOR apps. So thanks again, and I wish everyone a great day.
Bye.